Hello, Roz. Hello, everybody else. Happy Sunday. I'm back with Latin. Oh, thanks, Roz. Tier 3 for 17 months. Well, subscribed for 17 months. That's crazy. Thank you very, very much. Gonna spam you with some emotes here. So, thank you. It means a lot. How are you doing today? How's everybody else doing today? I should probably say live in Discord real quick. Live with Latin. All right. I've been up for a while. I think my brain's starting to fall back asleep, but otherwise I'm all right. I hate that feeling of, okay, I've been up now. I should go to sleep. But here we are. Doing some Latin. I don't 100% remember where we ended last time. So we're just going to start here because it'll be a good recap place. On the pluperfect and future perfect active indicative of regular verbs, because we've already done the plu and future perfect of the verb to be, we don't actually have to learn anything new. It's the exact same, because all verbs in the perfect active tense are regular. So it makes it easy. So we need to recall that to get to the perfect active, we need to look at the third principal part that you just have to memorize. And once we've gotten to the third principal part, that's going to be our perfect active first person singular indicative. So we just need to get rid of the I, and that gives us the perfect stem. So we see here an example of the perfect stem from all the different conjugations. Amaw, Monu, Rex, Kep, Audi, Audi. It's weird without the final I. It's harder to say. Imagine that. So that's the perfect stem. That's from the third principal part. And then we just add the endings. For the perfect, I have had, or I have drunk, I drank. Either way is the perfect in Latin, and that's just isti, it, imus, istis, erunt. Those are the endings for the perfect active. For the pluperfect, yep, we're starting with the pluperfect, which is less common, but it means I had something something. In the past tense, I had loved, I had advised, I had ruled, I guess I should say in the past time, not the past tense. I had ruled, I had taken, I had heard. So when you're speaking in the past and you want to talk further past, you get that perfect stem, the third principal part without the I, and then you add essentially the imperfect of to be. Sorry, I'm trying to get some tunes going for myself so that I don't go crazy from silence and listening to myself talk. All right. So it's just eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. So the third principal part, then to the perfect stem, and then you add the imperfect of to be, era, and then the personal endings, mst, mustis, ent. So amaweram, I had loved. Eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. Okay. For the future perfect, It's pretty much the same pattern, but you put the future of to be instead of the imperfect of to be, because it means I will have something. The only irregularity there is the third plural, because it's ero, eris, erit, erimis, eritis, erint. The future of to be is, of course, ero, eris, erit, erimis, eritis, erunt, but we're already using erunt in our perfect. There we go. Amal erunt. So we don't repeat that. Keep the I this time. Because it's a future perfect, it's not very common. It can have a weird sound in it that Latin doesn't like. Because they're probably never going to see it. The end. All right. To form the perfect active infinitive, you get the perfect active stem, which is that third principal part without the I, and then add isse, I-S-S-E. So it kind of looks like the infinitive of to be, esse. That's a good way to remember it. Why would you want to use the perfect active infinitive? It seems weird because a lot of times when we use the infinitive, hold on. Cat issues. Hey, buddy. A lot of times when in English we use the infinitive, well, it's just the present. I love to eat. We're using the infinitive, but that's the present. I love to have eaten. I mean, I guess, because I do. I like having eaten. I like being full. But you don't usually say that. It is better to have loved and lost, and never to have loved at all. That's a good example where we do use it in English, but it's not super common. But we will learn soon. Well, once we get to part 3, constructions, Latin does more things with the infinitive than English does. So the perfect infinitive will be used. Just not often with what we know. Because we form clauses differently. But Latin uses a bit more of infinitives than we do. And a lot more participles than we do, but that's for later. We haven't even learned what participles are yet. All right. So let's review real quick. All right, a review of the tenses of the indicative shows the following formation. So there's the present, the imperfect, the future, the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect. Those are the 6 tenses, period. That's it. All the tenses. All right. The present is formed from the first principal part. All right. The imperfect is formed from the present stem, which is in the second principal part, plus the BA, which is our imperfect infix, and then MST mustus ent, or in the passive aris ter murmini enter, right? Whatever that personal ending is that we need. For the future, we get the present stem again from the second principal part. We add our infix for the first and second conjugation, bi, and then our personal endings, ost mustus ent. For the third and fourth conjugation, instead of an infix, we're not putting something in, we're just vowel shifting. So it's an A and then an E, a long E in most of them. And then the personal ending again, MST mustus ent. For the perfect, you go to the third principal part, and then iesiet imisistis. For the pluperfect, you go to that perfect stem, that third principal part, remove the I to get the perfect stem, and then ERA, and then personal endings, MST mustus ent. Future perfect, perfect stem, again, go to the third principal part, remove the I. ERI, and then personal endings, OST mustus ent. So this is a helpful little slide here. It just gives you a really nice summary of how to form all the tenses. And that is, again, all the tenses. We don't know all the moods yet, and we don't know all the voices yet. But I think today we'll be learning the passive for the perfect, and then we will know all the voices. We'll know all the active and passive for the indicative. And then we just need to learn how to make the indicative into subjunctive. And that's pretty much all the conjugated verb forms. Then we get participles too. Cat's going crazy somewhere. He's attacking his tail. Very good. All right. The synopsis of the active voice of amo. So if we were to give that in the first person singular, amo, I love. I'm a bomb, I used to love. I'm a bow, I will love. I'm a we, I have loved. I'm a weram, I had loved. I'm a wero, I will have loved. The present imperative, ama, love, in the active. Present infinitive, amare. And the perfect infinitive, amawisse. There we go. And all you need to do to change it to a different person or number is just change that last letter. In the active, we don't have helping verbs. We don't have to use personal pronouns for the subject. Everything is contained in this verb. We will have learned all the voices. Exactly. That's a future perfect. I like it. It's good to train your brain. All right. Learn the following principal parts, I guess because they're regular. Sum esse fui. Absum abesse afui. Okay. Do dari dedi. Datum. They didn't give you the fourth yet. Just learn the fourth. I'm always torn. Some textbooks, like this one, only give you the principal parts that you need. So you'll learn the first principal part, then the first two, and then the first three, and then the first. Well, there's only four, and then all four. That has the advantage of not learning extra material you're not using right away, and you only learn material that you use. But if you start by learning all the principal parts, then you already know them for when you get to the later stuff, and you don't have to be like, oh, great, now I have to memorize the fourth principal part and what to do with it. So I'm more of a fan of learning all the principal parts at the same time. Yep, that is how you write the fourth principal part for do. Do, dari, dedi, datum. Absolutely. I think that's probably where we get the word data, because data would be the neuter plural of datum, which just means the things given, which is pretty much what data is. Data is the stuff that's given to you that tells you stuff. I don't know. So there's more principal parts to memorize. I'm not going to walk you through that. If you want to learn Latin, memorize these principal parts. The end. All right, let's finish this story, and then we'll work on some of the passive. Yay! And then we'll review principal parts, and I think that will probably be it. Ooh, possum. Maybe we'll get to possum. We'll see how long this takes. It'd be good to do possum. All right, but we do have to do the perfect passive first, so. Possum, exactly. Yeah, so datum, as you know, is the singular of data. And possum means to be able. Well, okay, possum means I am able. But from the verb to be able. It's a very important verb. All right. So Perseus and Andromeda concluded. So let's see where they choose to end this story. Perseus semper proilio studebat et respondit, verba tua sunt maxime grata, et laetus arma sua magica paravit. Subito monstrum videtur, celeriter per aquam properat, et Andromedae ad propinquat. Eis amici longe absunt, et misera puella est sola. Perseus autem sine mora super aquam volavit. Subito descendit, et duro gladio saevo monstrum graviter vulneravit, sorry. To me, possum is usually an abbreviation for opossum, but I have no idea whether it has any correlation to Latin. I don't think so. Because I think actually, I don't know the etymology of possum, but I don't think they're related. Diu pugnatur, diu proelium est dubium. Denique autem Perseus monstrum interfecit, et victoriam reportavit. Tum ad saxum venet, et Andromedam liberavit, et eam ad Cepheum duxit. Is, nuper miser, nunc laetus, ita dixit, tuo auxilio, mi amice, cara filia mea est libera, tua est Andromeda. Diu Perseus cum Andromeda ibi habitabat, et magnopere, a toto populo amabatur. The end. Very nice. I think it's just the pronunciation of possum, and sometimes people write it without the O because it's not pronounced. Oh, possum. Now I have to look up what the etymology of a possum is, and then we'll read about Perseus and Andromeda. Etymology. Okay, the word possum is borrowed from the Powhatan language. Okay, so it's a Native American word. It hath an head like a swine, tail like a rat, and the bigness of a cat. The Powhatan word derives from Proto-Algonquan, meaning white dog or dog-like beast. Following the arrival of Europeans in Australia, the term possum was borrowed to describe the distantly related Australian marsupials, which are more closely related to other marsupials, such as the kangaroos. There you go. That's information for you. Do with that whatever you want. Yeah, not Latin at all. Hey. Anyway, that was fun. All right, so, but what happened to Perseus and Andromeda? So last we met, Andromeda was tied to a rock because a monster was attacking her father because Poseidon was being mean. This version did not give the reason for that. Perseus was flying around on his winged sandals, saw what was going on, said that he would save Andromeda. Cepheus the king was very happy and said, "Sure, and you can marry Andromeda if you do." So, Perseus was always eager for battle. Semper studebat proelio. So studio is one of those verbs that takes a dative object to be eager for battle. And he responded, "Your words are most especially pleasing, maxime." So our superlative adverb there for greatest, most greatly pleasing. And happy Lytus, he prepared, Parawit, his own magical arms, weapons. All right, suddenly, subito, monstrum videtur. We got a ter here, so it's passive. So the monster is seen. Is seen. Again, we're moving to that historical present to make the story more exciting. Okay. Swiftly, celeriter, through the water, probably more like over the water. No, wait, we're talking about the monster. It is through the water. He hastens and he gets closer to Andromeda. All right, her friends, Eosamiki, are long absent. Longe absent, are far away. Kind of depends on how you want to understand absent. And the miserable girl, Miserpuella, is alone. Perseus, however, without delay, sine mora, flied. I almost just said flied. Flew, olawit, over the water. So the difference between super aquam and per aquam. Per is through, super is over. Over the water, and suddenly he descended and he wounded, vulnerawit, the savage monster, Sawe monstrum, gravely, seriously, Grawiter, with his hardy sword, duro, harsh, strong, durable, obviously. Words like that, sword. For a long time, it is fought, pugnater. So this is a good note here. So the verb pugnater means literally it is fought. So translate freely. The battle is fought, the contest rages. So this is something that Latin does not infrequently. Uses a passive verb without a subject just to kind of mean there is a battle. The battle is on. Fight it out. All right, and for a long time, the battle is unknown, dubium, right? Who's going to win? We don't know. At last, however, Perseus killed the monster and carried back his victory. I think that's metaphorical. We don't get an extra note for that? No, we don't. Okay, cool. That's chill. All right, see if you can explain the use of the perfects and imperfects in this passage. So, sudden actions, long ongoing actions. So, the first verb, studebat, he was always ready for battle. Right, this is the characteristic of Perseus, so we use the imperfect tense. And he responded, in this moment, there was one action that was taken at that time, completed. Anyway, back down to line 8. Then he came to the rock and he freed Andromeda and he led her to Cepheus. He, recently miserable, now happy, thus spoke. By your help, my friend, my dear daughter is free. Is free. Yours is Andromeda. Andromeda is yours. For a long time, Perseus used to live there with Andromeda, and he was loved greatly by the entire population. The end. Hooray, Perseus! So, a happy, happily ever after. And Perseus, again, as one of the kind of first heroes, things are less terrible for him. He kind of does live happily ever after. Again, there's the other version where he does have to kill Andromeda's uncle because he had been going to marry her before. But then this happened. So there is that version. But after Perseus killed her uncle, they lived happily ever after. The end. All right. So the passives of the perfects create a little bit of a hiccup. Okay. And that is because the perfect passive system, which includes the perfect tense, the future perfect tense, and the pluperfect tense, these are the 3 tenses in Latin that do take a helping verb. In English, we're used to this. We use helping verbs for most of our tenses. Will, or other helping words. So will, for example, we use with future. The verb is we use for passive in various tenses. So we are used to that in Latin. I mean, in English. But Latin does not do that except for the perfect passive system. And that's why it gets a tiny bit confusing. Because then your brain might want to do that with the present. And we don't want you doing that. Right? If you have to say Caesar is being stabbed, and you're talking about the assassination, that is all in one word. You don't need to put est, est ends stabbed, right? You just put ch, stabiter. I can't remember what the verb for stabbing is in Latin, so anyway. To help you out with the passive perfect system, that makes sense. If you want to stand up in theater and say Caesar's being stabbed, it's way better to abbreviate to stabitur. It's true. The present tense is much more straightforward. And sometimes when you're speaking in the present, you really just got to get that message out there. All right. But for the passive perfect system, we need to use the 4th principal part. That's the last principal part. There's only 4 in Latin. And from it, we get the participial stem, on which are formed the future active infinitive and all the passive perfects. So what does that note mean? All right. So let's look at our principal parts here. Amo, amare, amavi, amatus. So amatus, we use that to form the perfect passive system. Because what it is the perfect passive participle. So we're introduced here to our first participle. What is a participle? Participle is a verbal adjective. A verbal adjective. So it has kind of the movement of a verb, but it describes a noun like an adjective. Participles are super, 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 super important. There's a total of 4 participles in Latin. Present active, present passive, future active, and future passive. The perfect passive participle is the most important of those 4. For whatever, it's just really popular in the way that the Romans composed their text. They were big fans of using participial phrases instead of sentences. So they will pile on participles after participles. So it's really important to remember that 4th principal part. Amatus, monitus, rectus, captus, auditus. And the base of the participial stem is formed by dropping the US from the perfect passive participle. So what does that mean? Participles, as I mentioned, are verbal adjectives. Adjectives match the noun they're going with in gender, number, and case. So this fourth principal part is a first, second declension adjective. Amatus, amata, amatum. Monitus, monita, monitum. Rectus, recta, rectum. Captus, capta, captum. Auditus, audita, auditum. You know, earlier with dodar dedi datum, I gave datum as the fourth principal part. You could say datus. You could use the magitive, the masculine instead of the neuter. It kind of varies by what textbook you use. Amatus on its own means the masculine singular thing having been loved. Amata, the feminine singular thing having been loved. And amatum, the neuter singular thing having been loved. Perfect passive, having been blanked. All right. So in English, the perfect, past perfect, and future perfect tenses of the indicative passive are made up of auxiliary verb to be, because that's what helps us get the passiveness in English, and the past participle. I have been loved. I had been loved. I will have been loved. Okay. Very similarly in Latin, the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect use the perfect, imperfect, and future of to be as an auxiliary verb with the perfect passive participle. So amatus sum, I have been loved. Amatus eram, I had been loved. Amatus, or in my case, amata, iro, I will have been loved. So in some ways, it's very similar to English. We are using a participial form for the verb and a helping verb to be to make our passive tense. Unfortunately, because it's using the present, imperfect, and future of to be, it looks like you're saying I am loved, or I was loved, or I will be loved. But that is incorrect. That is incorrect. Right? Because for the present system, for the passive, you don't use a helping verb. Hopefully, it will help you remember because of how you form the perfect active. The perfect active, or the pluperfect active, and the future perfect active also use iram and iro attached to the present active stem. So I had loved is amaweram. I had been loved, amatas iram. I will have loved, active, amawero. I will have loved. I will have been loved, passive, amatas ero. Okay. So form-wise, not difficult. Conceptually, a little more tricky. Because we're not used to Latin using a helping verb. And because it's different than English, it makes it tricky. But form-wise, you know the forms to sum, you know the forms of iram, you know the forms of iro. You just need to know that those work with the fourth principal part for the perfect passive system. Perfect passive. Every other verb in Latin does not use a helping verb. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about participles. I've already explained it some, but we'll work through what he has to say here. So participle, partly verb, partly adjective. Right. As a verb, it has tense and voice, active or passive, present, perfect, or future. Those are our choices for participles. As an adjective, it is declined and agrees with the word it modifies in gender, number, and case. So the perfect passive participle is declined like bonus a and in the compound tenses, that being the perfect passive, pluperfect passive, future perfect passive, it agrees as a predicate adjective with the subject of the verb. That's another important thing to remember. When you're using these compound verbs, you do have to change the adjective. So vir laudatus est, the man was praised, the man has been praised. But if we talk about a lady, puella laudata est, the girl was praised, the girl has been praised. Consilium laudatum est, the plan was praised, the plan has been praised. Because the participle is like an adjective, you do need to change that ending, even the verb tense. Right? Viri laudati sunt, the men were praised. Puellae laudatai sunt, the girls were praised. And then consilia laudata sunt, the plans were praised, have been praised. The perfect passive infinitive, not tricky, fourth principal part with essay, to have been blanked. Again, not super common in English when we think about it, but it will prove very useful in Latin, very common. The future active infinitive is for, we're learning this too. Okay. So the future active infinitive, we're going to learn now. So to be about to blank. To be about to blank. So you take the present infinitive of sum, essay, and the future active participle. Okay, so perfect passive infinitive was the perfect passive participle in to be. The future active infinitive is a future active participle and to be. It is at least logical. There is logical consistency in this. All right, so how do you form the future active participle? Well, you take the perfect passive participle and you add urus instead of just the us. So again, so this participle, the future active participle, is made by adding urus to the base of the participial stem, which he has taught that the participial stem is the fourth principal part minus the us, or the adjectival ending. Thus, the future active infinitive of amo is amaturus esse. To be about to love. Amaturus. Formed from amatus. Remove the us and add urus. Amaturus. To be about to love. So amare, to love, second principal part. Amavise, to have loved. You go to the third principal part and add ise for the perfect stem. Future, you get the future active participle, which is the fourth principal part, plus urus, amaturus, and then esse, to be about to love. Again, we will use it eventually. The best tip for maybe remembering that is that the word future is a future active participle, futurus. It's a future active participle of to be. Sum esse fui futurus. The verb to be does not have a passive perfect participle for obvious reasons. The verb to be does not have a passive. So sometimes when dictionaries give you the principal parts of to be, they put futurus, the future active participle of to be, in as the fourth principal part because there is no regular fourth principal part because there's no passive. And if you have no passive, you can't have a fourth principal part because the fourth principal part is the passive perfect participle. So futurus. All right. Let's just review. Good plan. That'll be a good way to end. Review of principal parts. What are principal parts? Principal parts are the things you have to memorize about a verb so that you know how to form all verb tenses and moods and voices and people and number. Right? The principal parts are the 3 to 8 forms that you need to know to form everything that a verb does. I say 3 to 8 because English has 3 principal parts, Latin has 4, Greek has 6, 7, a lot. We'll say 6. And there's probably other languages that have more principal parts. But Latin only has 4, and that's not so bad. Yeah, Greek has too many verb forms. It's because it also has a middle voice, and it can't just do active and passive like the rest of the world. And by the rest of the world, I mean Latin. Anyway, it also has an extra tense. Latin just has fewer verb forms, so it has fewer principal parts. All right, so the following list shows the principal parts of all the verbs you have had, excepting those used in the paradigms, aka those that are normal. I don't know why that popped up. That was weird. Okay. The parts you have had before are given for review, and the principal parts, and the perfect participle is the only new form for you to learn. Sometimes one or more of the principal parts are lacking, which means that the verb has no forms based on that stem. So if a verb did not have the first principal part, it would not have the present active stem. Present active tense. If a verb did not have the third principal part, it would not have a perfect active. If a verb does not have a fourth principal part, it does not have a perfect passive, right? A few verbs lack the perfect passive participle, but do have the future active participle in urus, which appears in the principal parts instead. So sum esse fui futurus, for example. Absum ab esse afui a futurus, right? But dodari dedidatus. Do is best classed with the irregular verbs because of the short a in the present and participial stems. By the way, according to this book. Porto, portare, portavi, portatus. That's the way first conjugations that are regular always go. O-R-A, aviatus. It's the easiest of conjugations. Second, continuo, continuare, continui, contentus. So you'll notice that with second conjugations, you have a lot of UIs or VIs, and then sometimes SIs and DIs. So the perfects kind of start falling into regular patterns too, based on what the stem consonant is. So some of them have a fourth principal part, deletos, doctus. Some of them lack, haha, ironic, ageo lacks a fourth principal part, which means it neither has a future active participle or a perfect passive participle. But other ones, nakituras, has a future active participle, but not a perfect passive participle. Apparently, you do not use nokeo in the passive, even though injure. You can be injured, but not with this verb. You have to use another verb for it. All right. Conjugation threes. Again, that's going to be O or IOs. They're combining the IOs with the regular third conjugation because it's a short ERE in the second principal part. Then we got our I's, so a lot of Dixies. So the SI's again, the UI's. Injure is a nerf verb. Yes? That's why are other verbs able to injure you, but that one can't? I don't know. I think it's because, well, this isn't really an explanation per se, because I still don't know why it evolved this way. But nokeo, to injure, is one of the verbs that takes a dative object instead of an accusative object. You give an injury to. And so for whatever reason, as this verb developed with that dative construction in mind, it makes less sense to turn it passive. To be given an injury, but it just, because it's not an accusative object and a dative object, it apparently confuses Romans. You see that with obey also. So obey is another one of those verbs that takes a dative object, and there's no passive in that either. So even though you can be, I mean, you are obedient, so you're already kind of passive. So I guess that's just a verb that also just doesn't have a passive. To be obedient to someone. I'm obedient to him, he's obedient. But you can't, it's a state of being and not an action. Huh. Anyway. Language is fascinating. And then the fourth conjugation with the long IREs. I'm obviously not going to read through all of these, but I always suggest, as done here, keeping the conjugations separate. I would also separate out the verbs in the third conjugation that are IO versus the ones that are regular. I don't think it's best practice to mix them together. And then once you have them separated into conjugations, look for the patterns that you can kind of remember together. So like duco, ducere, duxi, ductum, dico, dicere, dixi, dictum. Those are fun to memorize together. Help you keep things straight. Right, but it's still, you're still actively doing something. I give my obedience to such and such. Just can't passively be obedient. Anyway. It really is like weird when you start trying to logic it out. Because, yeah, you can't passively. You can't passively be obedient, but you also can't. It's also not quite an active verb. It's more of a state of existence verb. Anyway, prepositions. Little change of topic here. So we learned before that only the accusative and ablative cases are used with prepositions. True. In Latin. Prepositions expressing ablative relations govern the ablative case, right? So things that have to do with going away from, or the source, or location, those are going to be ablative. Those we have here summarized. Oh, that's nice. The following table should be learned. Absolutely. Or ob, from, whom, with, de, down from, a or x, out of, pro, in front of, and sine, without. These all take Ablatives. Prepositions not expressing ablative relations must govern the accusative. For example, ad, to or towards, apud, among, and per, through. So ad, the to here is obviously not a dative kind of to, it's a directional motion towards. And if you have motion towards something, that's accusative. So ad, apud, going among. It's kind of like you're actually like going into somebody's house. So again, that kind of movement into, and then pair through when you're moving through something. Okay, there are some prepositions that take both ablative and accusative, so the meaning changes depending on what you're doing. So the preposition in, for example, means in or on with the ablative. And when it means into or against, you use the accusative. So if I walk into the wall, then I take the accusative. But if I am in the room, and I'm just simply existing in the room, that's the ablative. In plus a personal name does mean that against. So a lot of oratorical legal speeches, like in Catalinam against Cataline, are speeches against, they're the prosecutor's speech in a legal case. Yes or no questions? Okay. So we're just learning some random stuff today. Questions not introduced by an interrogative word like who, whose, whom, but expecting the answer yes or no can take different forms. Right? Is he coming? Just like not a leading question, implying nothing as to the answer expected. Is he not coming? Expected the answer yes. Is he not coming? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought so. He isn't coming, is he? No. Expecting the answer no. Get rendered so venit ne. Is he coming? So the ne is the neutral question word. It gets attached to the first word of the sentence, which is usually a verb in a question. When you're expecting a yes, no ne when it. So you put none in a question that expects yes, and you put num in a question that expects no. Okay. Nay, the question sign is usually added to the verb, which is first. Okay. Yes or no questions are usually answered by repeating the verb with or without a negative, or you can also do ita vero certe for yes and non minime for no. Okay. So none habebat Cornelia ornamenta audi. Doesn't Cornelia have ornaments of gold? Habebat, yeah, she does. So the none, you expect a yes. Num sextus legatus scutum in dextro brachio gerebat. Non in dextro, sed sinistro in brachio sextus scutum gerebat. Sextus doesn't carry the legate doesn't carry a shield in his right arm, does he? No, not in his right arm, but in his left arm he carries a shield. Repeating the verb is the clearest way. Is he not coming? And you say yes, it's not entirely clear. Yes, you're right, Roz. Latin is much more clear than than English. Latin is more clear than Latin. Good. All right. We've learned a lot of random things here at the end, so we are going to stop. There's some review sessions in the back. So if you're watching this at home, go right on ahead and do some review. We'll continue with 37 next week. Again, we are beyond midway through, So we're making good progress. And next time we'll learn possum, which is the verb to be able. So that's a good word to know. Oh, we get to learn about tarpeia. That's cool. And then we get a break from some verbs, which is good. And we get to learn relative pronouns and interrogative pronouns, which I don't know if that's actually an improvement, but it's not verbs for a while. So that's nice. And we get to finish the story about tarpeia. Oh, and more nouns. Yay. We get a nice verb break for a couple weeks here. Yeah. Ooh. Then we get this long story. That's exciting. It's some more third declension. I'm just kind of previewing here for myself as much as anything. Irregular. So we get third declension for a while. Adjectives of the third declension. Okay, that makes sense. So you follow with that. Then do we keep? Okay, yeah. We get a nice noun break for probably at least a month. We won't, after possum, we have one more verb thing to learn. But possum isn't hard. Because we've frankly already know the forms. And then we'll have a month or so to work on nouns and pronouns. So that'll be maybe even, yeah, we've got a while. They give us a long time before we have to do verbs, which makes sense. Because once we get back to verbs, we'll be doing subjunctive. We don't need to start that yet. Adjectives. Oh, sweet. Just kind of seeing opponent verbs. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out. Thanks for watching this later. I'll get this uploaded to YouTube and Twitch. Learn the principal parts of a possum. This is where the lessons move into dissection. Yep. All right, everybody have a lovely day and take care.